The member for North Island-Powell River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am honored to be standing here before you today to give my first ever speech as a member of Parliament. And let me first start off by thanking the incredible people of my riding of North Island-Powell River. I am here first and foremost because of the trust they have placed in me to be their voice and their elected representative in this esteemed chamber. And that is something for which I will always be grateful and I will never forget. It's been almost 2 years now since I first decided to seek the Conservative Party nomination and run in the last election, a decision that I made because I believed then, as I do now, that this country was headed in the wrong direction, that it was failing to live up to its true potential, and that it was sleepwalking toward a fiscal and cultural cliff. And I think there is no better example of that than the fiscal mismanagement that we've seen of our country. Mr. Speaker, when I worked at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, I used to tour this debt clock right across the country. It showed how much debt the federal government had borrowed and was leaving to future generations to pay for. It was a great tool for people to help visualize just how much we were leaving that next generation to pay for. Well, Mr. Speaker, that particular debt clock no longer exists, because under the Liberals and the NDP, we have managed to borrow more money in the last 10 years than every other government in the history of this country combined, and we literally ran out of digits on the clock. Of course, all this spending, borrowing, and printing of money has other consequences as well. The highest inflation we've seen in more than 30 years, as everything, and especially homes, have become less affordable. You know, there used to be a promise here in Canada, where if you worked hard, you paid your taxes and followed the law, you could afford a place to live. When my grandfather, who's now 94 years old, first came to Canada in 1957 as a refugee, he, like most new Canadians, started off with a minimum wage job working on the railway. Yet on that minimum wage job, he was able to afford a home and a nice piece of property right on Vancouver Island and have it paid off in less than 10 years. Does anyone think you could afford a home and have it paid off in less than 10 years while earning minimum wage anywhere in Canada today? I don't think so. The result of too much government, too much regulation, too much bureaucracy. It's time to remove the gatekeepers and start building things in this country again. And that also means supporting our incredible resource sector and resource sector workers who have been under constant attack from the Liberals and the NDP. On the North Island, where I live, forestry is down by a third. Aquaculture has been cut in half. Fishermen have had their access barred to areas they fished sustainably for more than 100 years, and the last mine on Vancouver Island closed as well. And on energy, Mr. Speaker, the Liberal record is even worse, axing the Northern Gateway Pipeline, telling our allies in Korea, in Germany, and Greece that there was no business case for Canadian LNG, and introducing legislation like Bill C-69 that killed dozens of massive energy and resource projects and led to tens of billions of dollars in investment fleeing to the United States. And for what? Just so these jobs can leave our country? For China, for India, for the US, to countries, Mr. Speaker, with lower environmental standards than our own. These are Canadian workers who have had their livelihoods, their ability to put food on the table to feed their families, sacrificed by the Liberals and the NDP on the altar of this green ideology. Here is the truth. No one does safety and environmental stewardship better than Canada or better than Canadians, and as long as the world needs lumber or minerals or oil and natural gas, as much of it as possible should come from right here in Canada. We also have to rebuild our military. We have our amazing men and women in uniform flying aircraft, combat aircraft, that are more than 40 years old, to say nothing of the state of our submarines. And our men and women in uniform, as amazing as they are, find a way to make it work. They really do. But it should not be up to them to become the world's experts in using old, rusted-out equipment. They deserve better than that. But there is maybe no issue where the Liberals and NDP have done more damage from a human perspective than their mismanagement of the addictions crisis. First, they decriminalized hard drugs, including fentanyl, crystal meth, and crack cocaine. Then they used taxpayer money to flood the streets with a highly addictive and deadly opioid called hydromorphone or Dilaudid, while marketing it to our young people as safe supply. All part of their plan known as harm reduction. The result, Since 2015, more than 50,000 Canadians dead from drug overdoses. That's more Canadians dead than who died in the entire Second World War. That doesn't sound much like harm reduction to me. And you know, they say the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? So how about instead of handing out free drugs, we get these, our fellow Canadians, into treatment, we get them into recovery, and we return them to being healthy, productive members of our society once again. At the same time, we need to repeal the soft on crime liberal legislation like Bill C-75 and Bill C-5 that have reduced jail time for serious offenders and granted near automatic bail for career criminals. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it seems the only people who ever punish for anything anymore under the Liberals and NDP are those who actually work for a living and follow the law, whether it's our law-abiding firearm owners who have been targeted and demonized by their own government, small business owners who have been taxed and regulated to the point of insolvency, or our resource workers, as I mentioned, who have had their jobs threatened, their careers denigrated, and in some cases, their livelihoods destroyed. Right now in Canada, in so many ways, it feels as if right side up is upside down and common sense no longer exists. And that brings me to the cultural erosion that we've seen, the tearing down of statues, the erasing of our history. I was there in Victoria the day this corrosive ideology all began, when they toppled the monument to the man who built this country and without whom Canada wouldn't even exist. The truth is, this country has so much to celebrate and so much to be proud of, and we owe an infinite debt of gratitude to all those who came before us, to the prime ministers, both Liberal and Conservative, whose portraits are hanging just outside these chamber walls, who laid the foundation for what would become and for what still is the greatest country in the world. And they laid those foundations, Mr. Speaker, by being bold, by being daring, and getting things done. Hear, hear. In the late 1800s, Canada was a small country, divided by language and religion, and surrounded by a larger and much more powerful neighbor to our south. Yet in that historical context, we completed what many consider to be this country's greatest engineering and political feat, the Canadian Pacific Railway. Championed by Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald, most don't know that the bulk of the work took just 4 years to complete through some of the most difficult and expansive terrain in the world, across the Canadian Shield, through the Canadian Rockies. It was the key to bringing my province, the province of British Columbia, into Confederation. Now, can you imagine, in the current political, regulatory, and cultural climate of today, if we tried as a nation to undertake a similar feat? Instead of championing these kinds of nation-building projects, government today seem to be actively plotting against them. But it doesn't have to be this way. Macdonald dreamed big. Sir Wilfrid Laurier dreamed big as well, and we can dream big once again. And the truth, Mr. Speaker, is that the silver lining to this problem lies in its solution, is that we don't need the government to step up in any particular way. We just need the government to get out of the way and give this country back to those who built it, the people. And that begins where this country draws its greatest sources of strength, the wealth of its resources and the ingenuity of its citizens. And I intend to do my part, Mr. Speaker, to always be a voice for the hardworking citizens of my riding and this incredible country, to always be unapologetically proud to be Canadian, and to always be guided, no matter what, by what is true and what is right, not by what is politically correct. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question.